Good morning, everyone. Good to
Good
see
morning,
you.
Professor Joe.
Okay. Eddie, Yunjin, Ayla.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. And Xiong, Young, Asalain. Okay. Okay. Let's begin the conference. It's right 10 a.m. Punctual in Korea time. Okay. Now I'm making an announcement of the opening of the 2022 KARMI conference. Okay. As you have already seen, this conference continues for 3 days, the half day today, the full day tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. The conference title is the ASEAN ESG and the digitalization, which is very hot theme in Korea and in whole country, in the whole world. I'm very pleased to announce the opening of this year KARMI conference on the first day of December. This is the new month and the last month of the year, and the beginning of the winter season in Korea. And now we have observed the weakening COVID-19 in Korea, thanks to the effort of the many people over the last 2 years. The pandemic has been classified as the most serious global risk by the World Economic Forum recently. And I hope we all can see a better new year, 2023, in every corner of the world. The KARMI conference, which stands for the K-ASEAN Risk Management Innovation, was first held in Vientiane, Laos, 2018. And this conference aims to promote academic exchange and collaboration between the ASEAN, Korea, and other neighboring countries, which are interacting more than ever in spite of the new or neo-protectionism throughout the world. The ESG and the digitalization have become a new buzzword to penetrate global village, including Asia, ASEAN, and other countries, to enable to open the world over self-protectionism or neo-protectionism. This year conference is being held under the name of the ASEAN ESG and digitalization, where you can review the meaning and implication by going through more than actually just 40 papers, a presentation for 2.5 days. All the subjects of the presentation have been submitted with the author's own choice without any discretion of the conference organizer. As conference host, I do appreciate efforts and contribution of all the presenters and the participants and the SAM member, and I hope you all enjoy the conference and Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Now we are opening the conference. First presenter is the Professor Yoshino Naoyuki in Keio University, Tokyo, Japan, who is now moving from Tokyo to Washington, D.C. By flight. So he left his recording of presentation materials. Actually, it was presented in a few weeks ago in Egypt at the COP27 meeting, so which is very interesting topic. It's also related to the ESG or the SDG issues for the environmental protection. The Professor Yoshino Naoyuki has served to the ADBI, Asian Development Bank Institute, for many years, and he retired recently, and to serve at the Keio University as an emeritus professor. while also serving as a research director of the Financial Supervision Agency of the Japanese government. So he's still very active and admirable academician. Please enjoy his speech.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. I would like to give my presentation remotely from Tokyo. My name is Naoyuki Yoshino. I am Professor Emeritus of Keio University, Japan, and also Director of Financial Research Center at Financial Services Agency, Government of Japan. There are 8 points in my presentation. First one is ESG investment, or green investment, is now becoming more and more important. And traditionally, investors are paying attention to return and risk. However, nowadays, investors have to pay attention to ESG, or greenness scores. And this paper will show the different definition is made by rating agency about ESG. The same thing can be applied to greenness scores. That will lead to distortion of portfolio allocation. Then the best way is tax on greenhouse gas. And lastly, I will touch upon the central bank's behavior to purchase green bond. And lastly, small and medium-sized enterprises versus large business as far as CO2 emission is concerned. In this table, there are 5 rating agencies, and you can see the red line on the right-hand side. This is the definition of ESG by each rating agencies. When we look at rating agency one by one, some rating agency look at companies' ESG efforts, and another rating agency look at the degree of disclosure. They will compute how many pages of their disclosure booklet talks about environmental issues. And another rating agency interviews the staff of the company and whether the company has an ESG policy or not. So in other words, depending on the rating agency, the definition of ESG is different, which means the ESG scores are also different. So in this paper, I'm focusing on E, environmental part, and we are not paying any attention to social and governance. So in this paper, we are talking about greenness score, or E score, environmental score, and that is our focus in this paper. And this table shows 2 companies in Japan. A is electric power company, and B is apparel company. And I picked up 2 rating agencies, rating agency X, rating agency Y. You can see 2 columns. Each rating agency has different ESG score. If we look at company A horizontally, rating agency has 9 score, but rating agency Y is only 0.4. And company B, rating agency X, give 6 score, and rating agency Y give 4.2 score. So if you compare rating agency X and rating agency Y, then the evaluation of the 2 companies are so different from one rating agency to another, because the definition of ESG rating is different from one rating agency to another. Traditionally, investors paid attention to rate of return and risk. William Portfolio and William Sharp and Markowitz received Nobel Prize, and they are talking about rate of return and risk in portfolio allocation. However, in this recent period, ESG should be added to the investments, or greenness score should be paid attention to. So that is the multi-factor model. This diagram and equation shows traditional two-parameter approach. Two parameters means rate of return and risk, two parameters. And utility function depends on R. Rate of return is higher, the better. And sigma square is the risk. If risks are higher, utility will go down. Then this utility function can be shown on the right-hand side diagram by red line. And black line of AB is the portfolio frontier of company A and company B. Then the optimality of the portfolio allocation will be achieved point E, where utility will be maximized. This is the traditional portfolio analysis. However, recently investors have to pay attention to ESG. Here I focus on E, environmental part, rate of return R, risk sigma squared, and ESG. Then we can solve this utility maximization based on equation 8 and equation 9. Then we'll obtain the bottom equation of alpha t. Alpha t is a ratio between company A and company B, how much it should be allocated. Alpha percent to company A, 1 minus alpha percent should be allocated to company B. Then you can see here the numerator, last term of the numerator, ESG-A minus ESG-B appears here, which shows ESG scores are important for portfolio allocation. By using diagram, this relation can be shown in these three-dimension diagram. Horizontal axis are return and risk. This was the traditional portfolio analysis. Nowadays, investors have to pay attention to ESG score, which is the vertical axis. Then rating agency will give ESG score, that is point A, and point B on the vertical axis. Then if we include this ESG score, then optimal point will become point F, and which is in the bottom different from E. So F is different from E because investors have to pay attention to ESG score. In this diagram, on the vertical axis, I draw two lines. Black line AB is one rating agency, and green line A prime B prime is another rating agency. As we have seen, depending on the rating agencies, the ESG score are different. Then we can bring this vertical optimization into horizontal rate of return and risk diagram. Then some rating agencies suggest point F is the optimal portfolio, and another rating agency say point G should be selected. So in other words, depending on the rating agencies, their proposal of the portfolio allocations be different. And this is the empirical analysis by using Japanese two-company data. Again, company A is electric power company, and company B is apparel company. Then you can see three rating agencies, Robeco-san, Sustainalytics, and Bloomberg. Then the bottom value of alpha is the allocation of their portfolio assets to company A and company B. First column is no rating, This is the optimality where ESG score was not paid attention to. So first column of no rating is no ESG score. Then 0.57, 57% be allocated to company A, and 43% should be allocated to company B. This was a traditional return and risk optimality. But if you look at Robeco Sum, Sustainalytics, and Bloomberg, then their suggestion will become the third row of value of alpha. Robeco Sum said it is better to allocate 71% to company A, then 29% to company B. Last column, Bloomberg, they say 0.54, which means 54% should be allocated to company A and 46% should be allocated to company B. And we can think about another model where ESG score will affect to the rate of return and risk. Even in this case, the same argument can be applied. Next topic is the relation between ESG score and stock price. There are many research going on in many parts of the world. Some analysis says ESG scores and stock prices are positively correlated. But based on my analysis, ESG definitions are different from one rating agency to another. Then it does not necessarily reflect in stock price. And this diagram shows only in the middle case, ESG score and stock prices are parallel. But on the another rating agency case, it is not, because the definition of ESG is different from one rating agency to another. Then what would be the best way to bring the portfolio allocation to optimal way, even though we are taking into account of environmental issues? Theoretically speaking, taxation on CO2 will bring back to optimal portfolio allocation. In other words, if some company, like company A, exposes CO2 a lot, then the total tax company has to pay is bigger than company B. Then that after-tax rate of return and after-tax risks will be changed by this taxation. Then, as you can see in this diagram, equation 16 is the after-tax rate of return, RA minus TA. TA is the total tax the company has to pay. And TB in equation 17 is the total amount of tax, CO2 carbon tax, the company B has to pay. Then equation 16 and 17 are after-tax rate of return. Then we can also compute after-tax risks, which is equation 19. Then this diagram on the right-hand side shows the frontier curve shifts down because of CO2 taxation. Rate of return will diminish, and then frontier becomes red dotted line. Then point T becomes the optimal portfolio. In this case, investors do not have to pay attention to environmental issues or ESG scores, because this is automatically taken into account by taxation on CO2. So investors can look at ex-post rate of return and ex-post risk as before. Then could it be possible to measure CO2 emissions? Satellite photo can catch the temperature of small businesses, large businesses, of the buildings, and housing. Then they can estimate the amount of CO2. So these satellite photo can monitor the amount of CO2 emission. And also in recent years, company Hitachi has invented a small CO2 measurement. And if we put those equipment into each room, then it shows how much CO2 is exposed by that room. So these innovations can allow us the amount of CO2 emission, which is very easy to tax on those CO2. Then another method to make unified portfolio allocation is the single green rating based on CO2 emission, NOx, plastics, and so on. And United Nations or ADB can issue these unified green rating. Then all the investors can look at this rating rather than consulting with one rating agency to another. And these single unified green rating will again bring back optimal portfolio selection. In actual policy implementation in taxation on carbon emission, I am proposing net tax. Net tax means carbon emission minus greenness efforts made by each company. Some company will plant trees in Amazon or in the forest. Or seaweed is very good to absorb CO2. And these efforts by the company should be deducted. Then the best way is charging net tax on these net emission. Then this will encourage portfolio investment into green sector. Similar thing can be applied to in the bottom of SMEs. SMEs are not issuing stocks nor bonds, so they have no pressure from investors. Furthermore, SMEs are not affordable to reduce their CO2. If small amount of tax is charged to SMEs, then they are aware about CO2 emission. So taxation will be very good, not only large businesses, but also small businesses. However, tax rate could be differentiated between large businesses and small businesses in order to reduce their burden. Next, I would like to talk about green bond principles. International Capital Market Association first issued in 2018 the definition of green bond. Green bond can be issued in the following 10 projects. Number 1, renewable energy. Number 2, energy efficient housing, energy efficient building. However, these green bonds are also very vague. I interviewed the energy efficient building in Tokyo. I asked the issuers of the bond how much of CO2 had been reduced with this green building. They said, we don't know exactly, maybe about 15%. And another building, they may be reducing 20%. So various CO2 cut can be achieved, but the same bond is issued. And this is equation. The greenness score will be changing portfolio allocation. Lastly, I would like to talk about central bank's efforts to purchase green bond. Traditionally, central banks were number 2. They purchased ordinary government bond because allocation of budget in the bottom, education, infrastructure, green sector, these were policy-oriented. Politicians and fiscal authority will determine this allocation of their spending. So if central bank comes into the left, so that means central bank is allocating certain amount of money to green sector by themselves. However, those allocation of budget should be determined by fiscal authority. It is not monetary policy. So I would like to recommend number 2 would be better than the left-hand side of number 1. Thank you very much. That's all my presentation.
Thank you, Professor Yoshino, for your insightful presentation of the ESG issues in financing and taxing and the management of the fiscal policy for the environmental protection issue. Do you have any question or comment on the Professor Yoshino's presentation? Although he's not here at the moment, I can deliver your comment or questions to him. Professor Yoshino said he was rated as the #1 economist in Keio University and #4 in whole Asia or something like that. So he is quite productive and energetic senior professor of Japan and of Asia. He combined the traditional portfolio theory with ESG parameters to produce a new optimal portfolio allocation. And in taxation, not only the large size corporation, but also the small and medium sized corporation would improve the environmental issue and the optimal portfolio of the investors. According to him, the small and medium sized enterprise generate about 50% of the total carbon dissemination. So he insists to charge the carbon taxes also on the small and medium sized corporation. Although the small and medium sized corporation are not so strong to pay the tax, so he suggests a kind of adjustment of the tax rate for the small and medium sized corporation. And also the last point of his presentation was to combine the green investment with the fiscal policy rather than the monetary policy. This presentation was made 2 weeks ago in the COP27 meeting. So it's very impressive what encouraging, what the powerful, what the thoughtful idea to use for the ESG development. If you have no comment or question now at the moment, you may contact him afterward if you hit up on any question or comment. Now we are moving on to the next session, chaired or moderated by the Dr. Kim Bo-yeon, who is an adjunct professor and a researcher at the SK Hwang University. Dr. Kim is a very talented young scholar. She was educated not only in Korea, but also in China. She graduated from Peking University, Department of Insurance and Risk Management. And then she moved to UK for her master degree in City University of London. And then she got some jobs, the insurance companies in UK and in Singapore. And recently, she got PhD at SKKU to teach at the same university. Please welcome Dr. Kim Bo-young for her moderation of the session from now
on. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bo-young Kim, and today I'm moderating the whole session for today. Our first session is ASEAN and innovation, and the first topic is the impact of fintech lending expansion and credit limit on bank risk-taking behavior, presented by Eddie Junarsin from University of Gajah Mada. Sir, are you ready?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm ready. Hello.
Are you
Good
ready
morning.
to share your screen, please? Yeah. Yep. Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kim Bo-hyun, Professor Jung, and other esteemed colleagues. Very good morning to you all, and I'm very happy to be back at your conference. It's always my honor and delight to be here with you. I was quite threatened by the first paper because it was so good. So I want to ask questions, but didn't really understand the. I mean, the portfolio theory was nice, but with the ESG and things, it was really amazing. So it was, again, I'm the next presenter, so it's quite threatening to me, because if you compare the first paper and my paper, would be quite a world apart. But I'll try for my presentation today. Is we take another side of the story. Now we go to the fintech firms, the association of crowdfunding fintech, especially in Indonesia. It's something that I use as a showcase for the research, for the empirical evidence. So my name is Eddie Junarsin. I've been with Gajah Mada for many years. Moving on right now, but thank you for inviting me, as usual, and also happy to be with my colleagues from SKKU. Happy to be with you and to teach at SKKU for a while as well, from far away. All right. So share my screen. So this is about the fintech lending expansion and whether it would disturb financial system stability, and using Indonesian data, because that's the easiest to get in my my situation for the last maybe 1 or 2 years, when we we started conducting this research. All right. So essentially, we observe like two major conjectures: competition instability hypothesis and the competition stability hypothesis. I think we can imagine in South Korea, in China, and many parts in Asia, and of course in the United States, where this kind of like fintech and also non-conventional financial institutions have flourished enormously, like in the US and many parts of Asia as well. This competition instability proponents, they believe that the emergence and also the development of fintech would disrupt the financial system and also stability, because like traditional banks would be threatened, transaction costs would increase, the cost of debt would increase, making it more difficult for the banks to survive. So lower profitability, maybe threaten liquidity, and finally many would collapse or would disappear or would consolidate at least, and that might threaten the financial stability of a country. On the other hand, the competition stability proponents, those researchers believe that actually it's not something that is necessarily mutually exclusive, but they could complement one another. For example, with the asymmetric information reduction in the credit market, and that directly might lead to like milder risk taking, not necessarily lower, but maybe milder risk taking, and that might also increase the bank resilience to systematic or systemic shocks. So we try, I think, under within the frameworks of the two conjectures or two opposing hypotheses, we utilize several econometric methods like the OLS with also with fixed effects, random effects, and two-step GMM regressions to test the hypothesis. So I'll go quickly here. The second part of our research is about the lending limit. But in Indonesia, it has been for a while, maybe more than 5 years. The limit for fintech lending is 2 billion rupiahs. I'm not sure how much it is in Korean won, but it's 2 billion rupiahs, and the demand is so high. From demand and supply, both are quite aggressive, but I think the Financial Services Authority of Indonesia tries to be more careful and vigilant. So they're quite slow in responding to the request to increase the lending limit by fintech firms. It has been like several pieces of research that try to convince the Financial Services Authority to increase the lending limit. And our research here, our study finds that actually the amount between 5 and 6 billion rupiahs would be the most appropriate or the most ideal for the fintech firms and also for the medium and small sized enterprises, because they need a lot of financing there. So introduction, I will just skim through quickly to save time. So fintech firms, I think it's already quite well known everywhere, and especially in many countries, especially in developing countries, they function to help the conventional financial institutions to channel funds, so to improve like development or economic growth, and also to improve the equality or the balance of development. You see the fact that there are so many unbanked people because they are not equipped with collateral or some references or something. On the other hand, the development of fintech might threaten the stability of financial systems because of the increasing risk. I think that's the idea that we always see everywhere, but the trade-off between financial inclusion and also financial inclusion and also the systemic risk. I always see within that framework or that discussion point there. So again, we have two competing hypotheses here that we try to address: the competition stability and competition instability. The competition stability view, of course, argues that concentrated market potentially triggers moral hazard. So actually, if the financial institutions are concentrated among the big banks or certain conglomeration companies, that's not good for the economy. That's, I think, the major argument of the competition stability hypothesis or view. On the other hand, the competition instability view, they're saying that with the increasing or the expansion of fintech lending, again, that would trigger like shadow banking activities. The shadow banking activities means the banks try to channel funds through the fintech firms as well, right? Because of competition, and in the past, they might see the fintech firms as like opponents or enemies that they had to fight and try to destroy and somehow to just make them disappear. But nowadays, they have like a more strategic view of how to treat the non-conventional financial institutions like fintech firms. So they could collaborate, they could make a joint venture, they could whatever, but do it together. And one of the approaches would be to channel the funds through the fintech firms. So we call it shadow banking or shadow banking activity. So the two opposing, again, the conjectures, and those framework, or the framework, leads to our the main contribution of the research objective that we try to achieve here. We see the fact that the incumbent or the existing literature has studied like financial inclusion, risk taking, the shadow banking and things, and also there's a second point here. The literature also shows that fintech increases bank risk by increasing the cost of debt or the transaction cost. So we try to encapsulate or encompass those findings with the idea that maybe we should combine, what about the relationship between the shadow banking, the fintech lending expansion, and also bank lending expansion, and all the other supporting or control variables, and how they interact, especially the fintech lending expansion and the bank lending on the shadow banking and also the bank risk taking. I think that's the main idea of the paper. So I'll just skip the literature to save time. I mean, if you're interested, I can send you the paper actually. So essentially, what we try to conjecture or hypothesize here would be, the first two hypotheses are about the shadow banking activities. So we have, for example, the first one, bank lending activity. So the major variable of interest, the major independent variable of interest, bank lending activity is, we hypothesize that it's related or positively related to the shadow banking activity. And also the second one is fintech lending expansion is negatively related to the shadow banking activity. So our first dependent variable is the shadow banking activity, and the second dependent variable is the bank risk, represented by the credit risk. And same thing here, we try to see the relationships between bank lending activity and fintech lending expansion to the bank risk or credit risk taking. The second part of the paper, again, is about the credit limit. So we try to use the dynamic threshold regression. Using the dynamic threshold regression, we could estimate the turning point where the lending limit would be beneficial to enhance the profitability of fintech firms, and on the other hand, there's a turning point where the risk or the credit risk would increase. So we argue that the turning point would be an important indicator, or as to how we gauge the benefits of setting a new limit, by an updated limit, especially in the context of Indonesia. And of course, this could be extended everywhere, in many other countries in ASEAN or ASEAN +3 or something. So we use 34 regions, essentially all regions in Indonesia, all provinces in Indonesia, from 2019 to 2022. And we excluded a sample that has less than 3 years of data. Final data are comprised of 1,023 region month observations, and most of the data were gathered from the Indonesian Financial Services Authority. Some other macroeconomic data were gathered from the central bank, the Bureau of Statistics, and some official offices or bureaus. Okay, the variable definitions. Then our major dependent variables are shadow banking. The shadow banking here, we measure the shadow banking as the log value, the logarithm of credit channeling activity. So we got the data from the central bank and also from the Financial Services Authority. And then the credit risk or risk taking is proxied by non-performing loans. Again, this is not difficult to collect. I mean, the data are widely available also. And profitability would be or was proxied by the operating profit and leverage with the debt ratio. The descriptive statistics here, we did some winsorizing as well. If I'm not mistaken, it's like 1% up, 1% down. So it's typical winsorizing to reduce the excessive impacts of the outlier values. I mean, we tried to be careful because our data set was not really a lot. You know, if we did a lot of winsorizing, that we would lose so many data points. So we were quite careful in doing that. But yeah, I think somehow it smoothed out the data, so it's not not too many outlier data included that would skew or bias the whole data set. Independent variables here, again, the major variables of interest would be the fintech lending and also the bank lending. And there's a vast array of control variables there with the size, loan to deposit, profitability, capital ratio, and some macroeconomic indicators included as control variables. The estimation model is quite straightforward. The shadow banking here is related to the FE and BL would be the main variables of interest. FE is the fintech lending expansion, BL is the bank lending, and all the others are control variables. And BR is the bank risk and credit risk, and the second part is the lending limit, where we use the dynamic threshold regression to estimate the limit, or the lending limit regulated by the Financial Services Authority on the fintech firms lending. So results here, just go straight to the tables. I think it's clearer. You can see here BL, our first hypothesis, the bank lending. Here, actually, it's quite consistent for all the models here. The OLS, and the fixed effects, random effects, and two-step GMM as positively and significantly related, and it's quite a strong, significant level at 1%. That's positively related to the shadow banking, meaning that actually, we are looking at the diversification. I think diversification strategy by a lot of banks in Indonesia. By the higher bank lending is positively related to the shadow banking. So again, shadow banking means they try to channel the funds through non-bank institutions. So I think this is one of the indicators that they have been trying to diversify. But if we look at the fintech lending expansion, here, actually the sign is negative. They're highly significant as well, except this one. This one is not significant, but 3 of the 4 models show strong significances, and the sign is negative, meaning that actually, so the higher the fintech lending expansion, actually the lower the shadow banking, meaning that the banks, although they have employed the diversification strategy by channeling funds to non-bank institutions, but they didn't necessarily do it through fintech firms. So this is quite enlightening, because now we realize that banks have many other channels, right, to distribute the funds to the non-bank institutions. So not necessarily through the fintech lending, but the fact here shows that actually with the emergence of fintech firms and other non-conventional bank institutions, they have been trying to diversify. So they don't just keep do nothing, or they're just inactive or something. That's not true, right? They try to diversify. And other control variables, I think it's not really our main focus. But if we look at the interaction at the next model here, where we include the interaction between the fintech lending expansion and bank lending, all the sign, I think it's still consistent here. Fintech lending is negative and significant. The bank lending is positive and significant. So when we interact, we get a positive sign. The interaction has a positive sign, but I guess when we add them together between the three, I think the results are still negative. So it reduces the negative, right? The negative relationship. So I think with the somehow we are looking at the fact that although there's a positive relationship between bank lending and shadow banking, but the higher the fintech lending expansion, then the weaker the positive relationship between the bank lending and the shadow banking. Right? So somehow with the existence of fintech lending expansion, actually that weakens the positive relationship between the bank lending and the shadow banking, meaning that actually it affects the presence and the strength of the banking system, right, with the emergence of the fintech firms. However, if we look at the from the other side of the story about the bank risk, actually we are looking at the see the results here. It's quite encouraging results to see that actually the relationship between bank lending and also fintech lending expansion and the bank risk actually negative and significant. I would say in at least in some of the models, it's more convincing for the bank lending. For the fintech lending expansion, it's only significant under the oil as approach. But for the bank lending, we see we get a quite convincing negative and significant connection between bank lending and risk. So what's happening here? The higher the bank lending, and also the higher the fintech lending expansion, the lower the credit risk. So this is quite encouraging, meaning that they don't necessarily worsen, the risk situation or bank taking behavior. So if we combine or we take the whole story together, I think you can imagine that actually they diversify with the existence of fintech firms. Banks have to diversify. They have to find better ways and approaches to being more efficient. So they diversify, although they don't necessarily do the shadow banking to fintech firms. So they might do it through other channels, but at least they don't keep, they're not stuck there. They don't do nothing, but actually they diversify and they try to be more efficient. But on the other hand, they're increasing shadow banking and also the banking activities do not necessarily worsen the risk situation or making the systemic risk increase or endangering the financial stability or something like that. But it's quite interesting if we find the interaction here between the two. Fintech lending expansion and bank lending, both of them have, again, negative. In many of the models, negative relationship. When we interact both, the sign is also negative, meaning that the negative relationship is even deeper. So what's the meaning here? With the higher or the increasing fintech lending expansion, that will actually strengthen the negative relationship between the bank lending and the bank risk taking. This is quite encouraging, meaning that actually the existence and development of fintech lending does not increase the systemic risk or at least the bank risk taking behavior. And then the final part of the paper is again about the limit and to make the story more efficient. So we find out that actually if we look at the dynamic threshold equation here, this is the third regime that is still significant. By the way, the first model is about profitability. The second model is about risk or leverage. So for the profitability, the final step or the final regime that is still significant is the third one, right? The third regime. Whereas for the leverage, the final or the penultimate regime that is so significant is the second regime. So we look at this one. It's 5 billion for profitability. This is the turnaround point, meaning that above 5 billion, if the regulator increases the lending limit beyond 5 billion, actually that would not benefit the fintech firms with respect to profitability. On the other hand, regarding the risk or the leverage, the limit is 6 billion, meaning that beyond 6 billion, increasing the lending limit beyond 6 billion will increase the leverage or the risk. So we suggest or we recommend that the lending limit should be renewed, should be updated, should be set between 5 and 6 billion rupiahs in the context of Indonesia. So I think that's all from my paper. So essentially, it's quite encouraging for the context of Indonesia, in that the fintech lending expansion and also increasing bank lending activities that lead to higher shadow banking. They do not necessarily increase the systemic risk, but they actually they provide benefits to the industry, to the business people, especially the small companies and something like that, that they provide more inclusion with the shadow banking activities. But again, we see that the banks try to be more efficient, they try to diversify, but they don't necessarily channel the funds to fintech firms. I think that's all from me right now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your intriguing research on the relationship on fintech leading expansion and shadow banking, as well as credit risks. We are running out of time, but any comments or questions from the audience? We've got 3 minutes. Any comments or questions from the audience?
Okay, let me ask a short question. Before I listened to the presentation of Eddie, I thought there is a crowding out effect of the fintech in the banking market to drive out the traditional banks out of the very low level risk market. So your presentation show something different from my my own belief. So are you saying the fintech banks are covering the different market from the traditional banks?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Joe. I think at the earlier stage, they were serving like different targets, different target markets, and also Professor Joe, I think you were right. Like our conjecture, maybe from several years ago, we would predict that somehow the banking sector would consolidate, or they would eat up the fintech firms and so on, because we learned from the transportation technology firms when the traditional taxi or car companies retaliated against the newer form of technology. I think the banking sector learned from the mistake by the traditional car and taxi companies, because it's hardly possible to fight against technology. So I think the banking sector realizes that if they although they still have like 3 major competitive advantages over the fintech firms, which are the customer, compliance, and capital. But at the end, fighting against technology wouldn't bring them far. I mean, somehow they would have to concede a lot of market share, especially maybe the retail sector, and then in the future maybe the wholesale sector as well. So they're learning from the mistake in the transportation business. So they're willing to collaborate, and through the shadow banking system, which is allowed in many countries, they could channel the funds to fintech firms. Actually, there's a win-win strategy between the banking sector and also the non-conventional financial institutions like fintech firms. I think that's what really happening right now. Right? They collaborate, and many depending on the countries, in some countries they are even allowed to own fintech firms, but in some other countries they are not allowed. So they can only make a joint venture, or they could do it through their parent companies. Especially in many Asian countries, like a parent company could own a bank and also a fintech firm, but the bank itself may not be able or may not be allowed to own a fintech firm. So now they are collaborating, and this kind of system, I think, is a win-win strategy. Something that will be quite interesting to see in the future, I think.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Now we move on to the next guest speakers, Kamal Tip Mahavong and Titivadi from Chulalongkorn University.
Good morning. Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. Let me try to share the slide. All right. Okay. So can you hear? Can you see my slide?
Yes, very well.
Okay, all right. So this paper is about the revolutions and the prospects of agriculture insurance in Thailand. And today, sorry that Kamaltip cannot join for the events. So I am Titivadi, would like to make a presentation. The paper, it's about the history and current and in the future of the agriculture insurance in Thailand. So I would talk about first about the history and for the introduction of the agriculture insurance. And then we move on to the current situation and going to focus especially on the rice insurance program. And then in the future, if we have the agriculture Insurance Act in the future, so what we're going to move to, and then finally we go to the part of the conclusion. Okay, so for the history of the agriculture insurance in Thailand, we have been like up and down for a very long time, like for 40 years. In the past, is focusingly most on the voluntary agriculture insurance. However, it doesn't seem to work very well because maybe because of the farmers did not have so much money in terms of the economic capability to pay for the premium, and also on the maybe because of the varieties or the risk happen, so the loss ratio is pretty high, and it caused the insurer to get lost for a lot. So it's been stopped for a while until in the year 2011, and I will talk about it later. So the insurance that in the past we have on many kinds of the crop insurance, including, of course, rice insurance, and also on some other crop product, and including on the livestock insurance as well. However, it seems to focus on dairy cows and the beef cattle. However, it never touched on the other livestocks, and also did not never have on the aqua culture, for example, like shrimp and the fish. And in the past, we have tried to use on the weather index on the mass, because the World Trade Organization introduced this one in India and is so successful. However, when we try to adopt the weather index in Thailand, about, I think, 5 or 7 years on the mass, it doesn't seem to work very well. So finally, it's been stopped until again in year 2011, the government tried to promote the insurance as a risk management tools to the farmer. So it's been like becoming to seems so working. So they try to keep that kind of methodology or the scheme until recently. So the coverage right now, it's focusingly on the indemnity base, and it's kind of the name peril. So however, on the name perils, it's like very varieties, including the pest and also the accidental peril, and also on the natural perils, for example, like flood, drought, windstorm, hails. And so the crop insurance recently that the government tried to promote is focusingly on the rice and the maize, and it's kind of the cooperation between many parties. For example, like the bank agriculture cooperatives, which is like the enterprise state bank, and with the OIC, the Office of the Insurance Commission, and also with the Thai General Insurance Association, and of course with the Ministry of Finance, that because it's kind of the government subsidy on the premium to the farmers. So the coverage has been of the insurance try to be on the ground that it's kind of is the on top of the assistance program that the government again try to promote the insurance as a risk management tools beyond just the fixed amount of the money that give for the assistance to the farmer. So the coverage of the insurance, you can see that maybe it's not that much. It's around like 11 to 12 or 1300 baht per rai. It's like the measurement of the crop area. So however, if we compare to the cost of the cultivation of the rice, is about 4,000 or 5,000 baht per rai, and that's again because it's the insurance is like the on top. When the disaster happened, the government is still okay, provide some fixed amount of the money, for example, like 1340 baht per rai. So it's maybe about half of the cultivation cost of the rice farmer. And again, on the coverage, it's been covered in terms of the name peril under the two sections of the natural perils, for example, like flood, drought, cold, windstorm, hail, fire, and elephant. And also another section is about the disease to the rice and the maize, and especially focus on the pests. And again, I will focus on the rice insurance program for the information that I would like to give it to you right now. On the insurance program, they try to focus mainly to the farmers who make the loan or borrow the money from the agricultural cooperatives bank, which is the state enterprise bank. So the policy has been designed in the two forms. The first one is kind of the policy type 1. That means it's kind of the general to the any kinds of the farmers, and the government will subsidize for the whole premium through the BAAC or the cooperative bank to the farmers. And however, that part, the sum insured is quite limited. So again, it's not going to cover for the all whole cultivation costs of the farmer. So they design on the policy type 3, which is try to separate on the risk level by the area zone. So for example, there are some zone that have the low risk because of the water it's been provided. So it's like the green zone, and then the premium is lower. And then on the yellow zone, the risk level is increasing. So the premium it's been higher than the green zone. And then finally on the red zone, that means the high risk. So the premium is the highest one. So in this policy type 3, again, on the some insured, it's like been increasing from the policy type 1. It's like the on top policy. And again, if the farmer is the borrower from the BAAC bank, the government is still subsidized for this kind of premium. And then finally on the policy type 3, if the farmer who are the borrower from the BAAC bank, if they need in extra coverage, so they have to pay the premium out of pocket by voluntarily participating in this kind of policy. And again, it's differentiated by the risk zone area. And then for the general farmers who are not the borrower from the BAAC bank, they can participate in policy type 3 on the tier 1, and the government will subsidize on the premium. However, if they would like to participate more, to get more sum insured, they have to participate in the tier 2. So in this area, again, the government is not going to subsidize for the premium. And it seems that the government tried to promote the insurance program by the incentive to the farmers with the premium subsidization. However, it seems to be working so well. However, we still face on the claim process, because the insurance gonna pay the claim payment to the farmers in case only with the announcement of the disaster, the declaration of the disaster zone by the local government. So this one is kind of the individual judgment or the local judgment whether that zone gonna face a disaster or not. So that make the claim process and the claim administration face on the obstacle of the length of time, and also maybe it doesn't fare that much, whether in reality and also with the declaration. So again, we still face on the claim process obstacle, because again, as I told you that from this diagram, you can see that the local government have to make a declaration whether that area have the disaster or not. And then finally, the farmer have to go through a little bit complicated of the process until finally the information will pass through the Thai General Insurance Association, which is the official authorization from the Office of Insurance Commission. So the length of time is about like 3 months, or maybe the least is like at least 2 months or 60 days. So that make the farmer face that or feel that it's too long. So this process have to be improved in the future. And on the bottom of the right angle, you can see that the Thai Insurance Association, when they got for the pool or the whole portfolio of the insurance transaction with the rice crop insurance, they will pass through each insurer that participated participating in this program. And normally the Thai insurer, each of them would retain about 20% of the insurance premium, and then 80% they will make a reinsurance, because the crop insurance or the rice insurance is still face some volatility in the loss ratio, which you can see in the next slide. On this table, you can see that the government been doing this kind of program since 2011 until now. And again, it seems that we have about 60 or 70 farmers that interested in joining this kind of program. And somehow we still face on the volatility of the loss ratio. So if you can see that on the loss ratio in here, that I'm trying to zoom in, it's about 500% something in the year 2011, and then it's go through the almost 300% in the year 2012, and that's because on year 2011 we faced on the great flood in Thailand. So that's we can see that a very extremely high loss ratio happened. However, in other years, you can see that the loss ratio is about 40 to 50% until year 2017. We again face on the very high loss ratio. And as you can imagine, that maybe it's because of the climate change happened through the whole world, not even in Thailand. So we face again on the challenge that the loss ratio is pretty high. And then that's lead to the current challenge situation in the rice insurance scheme in Thailand. So you can see that because it's a government subsidy in the premium, so in some part, and then also on the voluntary rice insurance scheme in some other part. So we face, of course, on the common problem about the adverse selection, where the high-risk farmer would like to participate in the program. However, on the low-risk zone area farmers that they try to cultivate on rice, they are less willing to participate or not participate at all. So it's kind of the adverse selection issue, very common. On the second issue, because the government's subsidized in the insurance premium to the farmer, so the farmer kind of accustomed to kind of addict to the subsidy, so they are less or not interested in participating in the voluntary rice insurance. And again, on the claim process, as I told you, that because they need on the loss damage declaration from the local area, so it's kind of the local judgment, and it makes the claim process is quite too long. So it's kind of the problem on the claim process. And finally, in some part, there are still a challenge from the Thai General Insurance Association to make on the survey, the claim survey. So it make the time even longer to pay the claim payouts to the farmers. And of course, it's make on the less satisfaction to the farmer. Somehow, when we talk about on the rice insurance program, it still seems there's some challenge or some cons of the implementation. Somehow the private sector, the insurer, they're still interested in some other economic crop in Thailand. For example, like longgong, rubber, durian, sugarcane, cassava. So it's kind of in the pipeline that they would like to launch this kind of program, which Longgong, it's right now is in practice with the weather index insurance, and also on the durian we use on the name peril with the indemnity base, and then also in the pipeline in the future, the insurer gonna launch more and more on the crop insurance. And finally, I will go to the future challenges in the future. So we would like to see that, well, in other countries, they may use like parametric index, which is quite convenient with the crop insurance or some other agriculture insurance. So maybe it's quite good also in some other products. For example, like with the aqua culture insurance that use with the fish or the shrimp, that because they're sensitive to the temperature and also on the rainfall, which cause on the pH index that makes the shrimp or the fish alive or die. So parametric index may be suitable for this kind of the insurance, which, yes, of course, it's good because of the transparency and easy to understand. The next one is about the area yield index insurance, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, that right now we are trying to propose to have on the Agriculture Act as a national one. So on the rice and the maize, we try to move from the name perils as indemnity-based insurance to move to the index-based by using an area yield index, because right now the technology help us to have the detail for the local average yield in some limited areas, which they should have the common risk of their own. So the area yield index should be suitable for them. And right now they are in the pipeline to migrate from the indemnity base to the index base as using the area yield index in the future, in the very near future. Another one is a satellite index insurance. This one, it's been studied for quite a while. However, this one is not suitable with something that, you know, like below the soil for the production damage, that it's hardly to prove. So it's still like kind of the debating whether we're going to use it or not. And at first we're going to use with the rice and the maize, and then we see that, well, it's still a little bit complicated, because even though the leaves still show green, however on the production maybe it's never have it at all. So maybe the satellite is not suitable for the crop insurance in Thailand. Revenue insurance, of course, it's been interested with the pigs and that because we have some of the self-growing farm that they would like to protect their revenue. So this kind of insurance has been proposed as well in the Agriculture Act for Thailand, that maybe is suitable for some specific livestock. And for the whole farm insurance, this one maybe is popular in Australia. However, it's maybe not suitable right now for the agriculture insurance in Thailand. So in conclusion, that I think that the crop insurance in Thailand still have the rooms to grow. We still have many other products, and also on the livestock and the aquaculture insurance should have the rooms to grow for the insurer. Because of the more developed technology and more details in the database about the loss damage would help us to create the variety of the more suitable products to the farmer. So hopefully in the future, if we have the right product and also the economic capability of the farmer has been increasing, we would see more voluntarily the crop insurance and also on the agriculture insurance. And that's all of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for Professor. Thank you for introducing crop insurance in Thailand. Thailand is one of the biggest rice exporters as well as other crops, as far as I know. And I think it's very important for the industry and the farmers to protect the farmers and the crops, right? I have actually a couple of questions to ask. One simple question is actually, you mentioned natural perils in the first page. Also, I was just quite curious. You mentioned that elephant is a hazard and perils in Thailand. Is it because those elephants can destroy the quality of the crops, or because they just freely move around the field and they might ruin the whole rice field? Does it work like that? And also my second question is, you also discussed about the claims process. Actually, maybe I have just missed some parts, but I was a bit curious if the rice insurance is co-insured between the government and the private insurers, and you mentioned that 20% goes to co-insurers and 80% is just ceded to reinsurers. Does it make sense, or did I understand correctly?
Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, very interesting. I would like to answer on the first question and then go to the second question later. On the first question, of course, in the rural area, you can see that we still grow the rice in like the northeastern and also on the northern part and also on the southern part, which we still have the foresty, like the national foresty area. So the elephant, the white elephant, is still living there, and of course, yeah, it's like kind of very close together with the farmers area. So of course, in Thailand, we still face that kind of problem that when the white elephant did not have enough food, they would ruin for the farmers area. Yeah, so it's kind of unique in Thailand.
Okay, I see. Actually, because I heard elephants in Thailand only eat bananas. I don't know if it is true or not, but I just got yeah, anyway, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and then on the second question, in terms of the cooperation with the government and the insurance association, and that's cooperation in terms of the government will subsidize on the premium. So that means they will pass through the money to the association. However, when the insurance association, they accept for the whole insurance transaction, they will retain that risk only 20%. And then another 80% they will, again, doing very similar to other insurance that like to cede even outside of the country for 80% because they're afraid on the concentration risk.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you for your question too.
Okay, any questions or comments from the audience?
Yeah, one short question to Professor Chibadi. You mentioned the irregularity of the government to announce the disaster, the declare. Do you think it's too generous or too strict?
Some local government, Professor Chung, is very generous, but some local government are too strict. So that means you can see that it's not in line with the reality. So it's kind of the bias problem is happening. and that's caused the problem.
I see. Same in Korea, I think.
I think it's because of the nature of the human beings, right? Some people are so generous, but some people, they go by rules. So
Okay, thank you, Professor. And let's move on to the next presenter.
Harila, you may have to turn on your microphone. We cannot hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm still in the process to sharing my screen. Okay. It's everyone can see my screen.
Go ahead, Harira.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Halira. Thank you for the opportunity. Today, I would like to present my research with Professor Rohim, the role of green bond in reducing global warming, Indonesia's green bond performance in supporting SDG. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. So this is the table of content that I will explain today. There is an introductions and also foundations, research methods, analysis and result, conclusions, and finding. First is introductions. As you can see, the table that you see on the screen, it's the progress of the SDG goal that has been done by the country that have joined the Paris Agreement in 2015. It can be seen that the goal number 13, or climate change, has a less significant percentage of the achievement, even though the problem is an important role for the sustainability of the country and even the world, can also be a threat to the global economy in the future. However, achieving the goals of the SDG require a large investment in building green infrastructure. For this reason, there is one way that can be done by implement sustainable finance, and one of them are with a green bond. So according to the Ministry of Finance of Indonesia, said that 29% of green bond are bought by green investor and 71% are bought by regular investor. From the buyer's preference and related to the project, Indonesian green bonds do not describe as a green bond. This shows that although green bond brings more benefit than conventional bonds, this is not the main considerations for the investor to invest in green bonds, where where this also related to investor preference, which indirectly also refers to investor preference. For this reason, it is important to know the risk preference of the bonds investor to help develop our green project. So the research questions is been based on 4 questions. First is, has the previous gain of or house money effect influenced the demand of green bonds? And the second question is, does previous loss or disposition effect has affect the demand for the green bonds? And does return affect interest in green bonds? And also the last is, does the movement of the green bond increase every year? And this is also, there's also the objective that we want to achieve in this research is to analyze the effect of the previous gain of or house money effect on the demand of green bonds, and also to analyze the effect of previous losses or disposition effect on green bonds demand, and to analyze the effect of return on the demand of green bonds. And the last is to analyze the movement of Indonesian green bonds. Sorry. The second part is we will explain about the base theory that we use in this research. Yeah, so the theory is from the disposition effect theory. Disposition effect theory is the tendency of investor to sell their stocks with a paper gain and hold their stock with the paper losses. Most studies attribute the disposition effect to prospect theory, which is proposed that individuals are risk averse when considering positive payoff, but risk seeking when considering negative prospect. And the second theory is the house money effect. House money effect is the opposite of DE or disposition effect, where an investor becomes risk averse after experiencing failure and become risk seeking after experience profit. And another fact that we found from previous research is investor risk preference is related to the return value, which is proven by empirical studies that the level of risk aversion will change along with the return value obtained. So this is the investor risk preference calculations that we use in this research to find out the risk preference of investor. The study adapt questions from the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada, or MFDA, the National Self Regulatory Organizations, or SRO, for the distribution side of the Canadian mutual fund industry. There are several questions addressed to analyze the investor risk preference. The questions are divided into several sections, including investment time horizon, investment knowledge, investment objective, risk capacity, and also risk attitude. The series of these questions will be proceed according to the method used by MFDA. All answer to each questions are predetermined value, which will be added per sections. And after getting the total value of each sections, it can be entered into the following table for further analysis. So this is the investor profile and also asset allocation. So after we process the data that we got, we can see that Indonesian investor, in this case is bond investor, it's fit with which profile of this 5 profile. Yeah. And the research methodology that we use is we use primary data, which we spread a questionnaire for bond investor in Indonesia. And as I said before, the data analysis method that we use is investor preference analysis using MFDA method. And this is the research variable that we use. We use a previous gain and also previous loss and return. And this is the hypothesis for this research. And the analysis result, First, we want to see the progress of green bond in Indonesia compared to conventional bond. As we can see on the screen, since it was issued in 2018, the price of green bond has slowly increased every year and has a pattern of having an increase approximately 4,000 each year, except in 2020 to 2021. The increase is slightly decreasing due to the COVID pandemic in 2020 and continuing to spread until 2021. In this, supported by data from Ministry of Finance in 2021, which explained that Indonesia has experiencing an economic contractions due to COVID-19, which is minus 2.07%. Similar to green bond, the movement of the conventional bond shows an increase every year, but has a higher number when compared to green bond. Yeah, so this is the result of the questionnaire result. As we can see here, we can conclude that there's no significant difference between the as we can see from the next conclusions slide, we can see that previous gains didn't affect investor interest in green bonds, and also previous losses doesn't affect investor interest in green bond, and return affect investors interest in green bond because from our result from the questionnaire, investors are more willing to take a risk after if they have a good return, and they're reluctant to take a risk after if they don't get a good return. And green bond price show an increase every year in 2018 until 2021. And we also find from this research that millennials and Gen Z are interested in green bonds, and also bond investors are dominated by women. Yeah, I think that's all for my presentations. Thank you, everyone.
Is there any question?
Thank you, Ms. Halira.
May I?
Any questions from the audience?
Okay, Hongju.
Yeah, I have two questions. First one is you have shown the kind of the income effect or wealth effect to show that there is a positive correlation between your wealth level out of your previous experience or investment with the investment on the green bond. So if you have a good experience with the past investment, you can buy more green bond. Otherwise, you will reduce the investment amount on your green bond. So it's kind of income effect or wealth effect, which is well known in the microeconomics. So what do you think is the background of the phenomenon? That's my first question. And second question is you have shown a picture which displays the growth rate of the normal bond and the green bond, which goes to parallel each other. Although there is a significant difference between the normal bond and the green bond, but I thought it's quite similar year by year. Does it explain something significant with the paralleling two line.
Okay. Baik. Thank you, Mr. Hong Chu Jung, for the questions. I will answer the second questions first. So the development of green bond and also a conventional bond in Indonesia shows almost a different from year to year. It's because in Indonesians right now, especially after the COVID pandemic or during the COVID pandemic, people are start looking on green bonds as one of their investment because they start to think more about the environments as they also think about the health issues. That's why the green bonds also increase. And on top of that, in Indonesia, we sell a green bond in outside Indonesian market. So that's why the development, it's quite the same as people outside Indonesia are more interested to buy a green bond rather than people in Indonesia. Yeah, I think maybe that's or answer your questions. And for the first question, could you please explain again?
Yeah, my question was your research finding that the green bond demand is related to the kind of income effect or wealth effect. So if you have a positive experience on your previous investment, you will invest more on green bond. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the alternative hypothesis or finding would be if you have a loss experience in the previous investment, you will buy more green bond. Okay.
Yeah, so actually this is related to the theory that we use in this research. So people are tend to hold their stocks when they're experiencing loss, but they're willing to sell their stocks when they're experiencing gain. So people are more risk averse when they're experiencing loss, but more reluctant to take a risk when they experience gain. Yeah.
In addition, Hongju and ladies and gentlemen, in Indonesia, a green bond is very new, and mostly the customers of the green bond is the investor that already buy the conventional bond. And now in the pipeline, there are many financial industries or company trying to get the new market in terms of green bond. Why? Because now from the presidential minister and many NGO always campaign about the ESG, and then it gives like a new wave that when we invest not only in the conventional, but we also think about our planet, our environment. So and the more they invest in the conventional bond, the more they want to buy the green bond.
In Indonesia, green bonds are issued by only government or also by private sector?
So from government and state-owned enterprise like the Bank Rakyat Indonesia, the biggest bank in micro, just launched the green bond 2 months ago. And then this is subscribed for 10 times. Then now there are many companies will to follow the way of the biggest bank rise the green bond. We do believe that it will be like a new trend in the investment. Any else, ladies and gentlemen?
can any individuals purchase the green bond, or just corporation or large size financial institution buy the green bond?
Retail can buy.
I mean, who can buy the green bond?
All investors, retail investor, institutional investors. There is like like allotment system.
I see.
Allotment system and divided by how many percentage for the retail, how many percentage for the institution, and when we ask the regulators why we don't give more to the retails, and the regulators think if we give all the portion for the retail, sometimes the behavior of the retail, they will sell quickly. So they also need a portion from the institutional investors. So there is allotment from the beginning.
Thank you.
Well, we'll still have 10 minutes. Maybe we can just briefly take a break for maybe 10 minutes, then continue, right? We shall come back in 10 minutes. So the next presentation shall start 12:30. Nguyen Thuy from Vietnam National University. She's going to talk about financial institution risk management in Vietnam. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Yeah.
morning.
Yes, I will share my screen now.
Sure.
Can you see my screen now?
Very well.
Sorry. Good morning, professors. Good morning, all participants. Let me say something about me and my presentation. At first, I would like to say thank you to Professor Hongju to invite me to your conference. Actually, I have a little time for preparation, and maybe it has some shortfalls, and I would like to hear from you the comments and some suggestions for my future research. My topic today is risk management in Vietnamese bank. And actually, I have three parts of my presentation. First, I will have a quick look at the Vietnamese banking system and risk management in Vietnam. And the second part, I will have a quick look at the risk management, how to moderate it, how to organize it. And I will show the case studies of Vietnam Bank and Myanmar banks. And the third, I will have the implication and some recommendation for the other banks in Vietnam. So let's have a very, very quick look at the Vietnam's macroeconomics and bank system during the years. So our economies, Vietnam economy is considered as Asia's economic success story in recent years, and we had the economics grow at 7.8% per annum in the last decade, and we certain challenge for the banking system because since the early months of 2008, that's we have the financial crisis, and financials and the trade deficits have become more serious concern. And that's why our governments prioritize the the target on the controls of inflation. And that's why we tightening the monetary policy to reduce money supply circulation. And the bank system in their turns will be the bridge for the economic capital, and it will be the most vulnerable part of the economy, so will be the effect by the policy. And the other thing, after we join the One Trade organizations, we issue the decrees to redefine the minimum levels of the capital for the commercial banks. And it's about 1,000 billion Vietnam dollars. It's equivalent to 40 million US dollars. And after that, we have the other rate. The other level is 3,000 billions, is approximately about 120 million US dollars. And this has a disadvantage for the small commercial banks in Vietnam. And that's why we had the very, very big trends of the M&A in banking system. And in the year 2000, we see that our bank system not paid attention to the risk management, and many banks have not regarded risk management as one of the important targets. Now, currently, besides the Basel II, many banks have also applied Basel III and IFRS 9, and this international standard have banks to improve risk management. And we find that we have the competitiveness compared to the other part of the world. Yeah, and I want you to have a very quick look at the Vietnam's macroeconomics. And you can see here, with the Vietnam's GDP, we have a very slight, we have the drop in 2020 and 2021, but we have the slightly increase in 2022, exactly in the Q1 and Q2. And for the purchase management indicators, you can see that we have a very, very good indicator here from the October 2021 up to now. And for the trade growth, we have the very good trade growth. With the 2022, we had the 30.3% of the trade growth. And for the inflation and stable currency, you can see that we control the inflation quite well. And the inflation now we keep at the 4%. And the external positions here, you can see the foreign reserves and the equivalence of import months. And you can see we have 3.8 at 2021. And for the part here, we have the stable Vietnamese currency now. And actually this month we have a slightly increase the rate between the US dollars and Vietnam's. And for the banking system, we have some good point in the performance. The credit growth recovered strongly in the first 5 months in 2022. And you can see that the figures for the year to date in May 2021, we have the plus 5% year to date. And for the May 2022, we have the plus 7.7%. That means we can compare between the year 2021 and 2022. You have the slightly increasing. And you can see we have the figures for the year 2022. We have up to now at May, we have the percent is the of the credit growth is of 7.7% compared to the year 2021 and the year 2022 is much more higher. And you know that's the most important part of the credit growth is for the retail lending. And the figure here is in 2021, you can see the retail lending is almost half of the lendings in Vietnam. And for the retail loans, we had the drop at 2022, but in 2021, we had the drop at 2020, and we have increasing percentage in 2021. And the credit risk is increased when a large portion of the loan is a real estate. And you know that recently we had many things with the real estate market. And the credit to the real estate now up to now to the quarter to the 2022 is slightly increased. And now we have credit to home buyers and credit to developers. And in the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the credit to developers increased to 18.6%, and the credit to home buyer increased to 23.1%. That means we a little bit rely on the credit to home buyers more than the credit to developers. And the loans to real estate related sectors. And you can see I list some banks here and show the proportion of the real estate related sector or loans. And you can see some bank has very, very high percentage as a TCB or BID or maybe other BCB. And I know that if we have the relation, the relation between the loans for the real estate, and we have the risk, the high risk. So I know that's with the increasing risk with the maturity real estate bond, because the loans is almost a tie of the bond in for the real estate. And some issuers are in trouble with the issue and fraud. And some newspaper in Vietnam refer to the Vạn Thịnh Phát groups. Tân Hoàng Minh groups is very, very big. And they have 1 billion bond in real estate. And they have the issue and fraud. And some of them are arrested by this. And you can see the proportion for the real estate corporate bond and the corporate bond in other sector. And you can see we have nearly half of the bond is for the real estate. And for the other thing, we can analyze the listed and the unlisted issues. Here, you can see almost the bond is issued by the unlisted issuers, and we can see that is very, very high risk with the bank, and that's why even we have the NPL ratio is decreased at this time, but we know that it will be higher in the next year. And we will have a very good thing here is that the operating income growth is increasing. Why? Because we have the digitalizations of the banks, almost a bank here, and that's why the cost for the operating expense is very, very low in the Bank of Vietnam. And you can see that we have the income for issuance business and income for the sector service is quite high proportions here. And let's continue with the risk management in bank with the case study of Vietcombank. Okay, maybe for the short term, maybe I will show only Vietcombank case here. And for the case of Vietcombank, so you can see that we start with the policy and regulation of the Vietnam to improve and to encourage the risk management. In 2016, State Bank of Vietnam issued many regulations for the adoption of Basel II in Vietnam. And according to the provision, banks should apply and comply with the regulation on the capital adequacy ratio, the CAR ratio. And with the circulars, Vietnamese bank have only started to apply Basel II since the beginning of 2019. And we have Vietcombank and VIB was the first two banks to fulfill the Basel II standards. And after being recognized by the SVB in 2018, two banks officially applied to Basel II. The other is OCB, ACB, TP Bank, MB, and VP banks. And the CAR is very tough for us because with the CAR ratio, we have to meet the requirement for information transparency and market discipline. So, and on that one is Pillar 1 and Pillar 3 of the Basel II. And we know that the journey to complete the Pillar 2 is very, very long for the other banks here. And in 2019, the VIB was the first bank complete 3 pillars, followed by, and the other banks followed, VP Bank, TP Bank, and MSB. And some other Vietnam banks have also embarked on the implementation of the Basel III. For example, Nam Á Bank and VIB has a target to have the Pillar 2 in 2020, and now they already complete. And the VIB and the VCB, and now we have the TP Bank, the other banks, TP Bank, MSB, C Bank, and some are on progress in applied the Basel III. And some announced that the completion of the IFRS applies. For example, TP Bank announced that they complete the IFRS 9. The VIB and Techcombank completes the IFRS. So let's see in the case of Vietcombank, so why they can do that. The most important thing when I interviewed us, they had to clarify the responsible for the risk governance and risk management in banks. And in the banks, they have the board oversight, and they have the risk management is a little bit lower. And you can see that for the whole control and risk management, we have the external audit, internal audit, and internal control activities here. And actually, in Vietnam now we move toward to have the risk management integrate into strategic planning, and we will do with the forecast, budget, monitor, measure, and plan, and after that we will decide the risk appetite, and we will do the action, and we will plan the action to mitigate the risk. And in Vietcombank, you can see in Vietcombank we actually we have they have the risk governance very clearly, that the risk governance policy when set up by the BOD and the top manager, top directors. And you can see the strategy, the vision, and the mission for risk management always be clarified and stated before the fiscal year begin 2 months. And you can see they had the other framework here is the internal capital adequacy assessment process. And the most different thing between Vietcombank and the other banks here, they focus on the macroeconomics forecasting, and they have the teams to analyze and to predict the risks from the macroeconomics forecasting. They have the software to work with the stress testing, and they have the early warning, and they have the risk management framework and manual. And the other thing, they have an integrated risk management framework supported by strong risk culture. They set up clear operation structure and establish a complete understanding of the risks and create strong risk awareness among staff. Actually, I am the instructor and I am the facilitator for some training in the Vietcombank and the other banks. And I know that they quite focus, they really focus on the risk culture and how to train the employees on the risk culture. And they provide the necessary tools for timely and accurate management information system. And they consider about the quantification of risks across all the banks. And you can see in the Vietcombank, they apply the 3 line of defense for the risk governance and management. And the board directors when in charge of the we consider is the ton of the top, and they when issue and when make decisions of the bank strategy, objective, risk appetite. And the lower level is mainly the CEO and executive managers. And we can see they have the first line, the second line, and the third line here. And in that case, when I have the interview with banks, I know that they have very clear risk governance structure from the board directors to the audit committee and risk management committee. And that's why I linked to this one, to the risk management, because of course the risk management committee, they will initiate the risk appetite and they will revise all the things related to the risk governance. But for the audit committee, they have to review all the things related to the risk governance and management. And for the executive level risk committees, they will have the asset and liability management committee and credit risk committee and operational risk committee. And on that one in Vietnamese phone is the uncalled committee. And for the risk governance responsible in Vietcombank, you can see the risk management committee, when they will have the senior management, and the lower levels, they will have the chief risk officers here. And the chief risk officers will do all the setting risk limit with the approval of risk appetite level and risk tolerance limit. And they will identify and assess and monitor the risk and day-to-day operate the risk management. So for the implication from this case and for our my analysis is the first thing, the other banks need to think about the state of the risk appetite from the ton of the top. And we should start with this point because in the past, Vietnam banks do not concern properly and do not pay attention properly about the state, the risk appetite. So now I think the other banks will learn from Vietcombank that we have to very carefully to do the risk appetite. And the other thing, we had to follow the Basel II and Basel III for the requirement of the risk committee. That means we had to define what is the board level risk committee need to do and what is the management level risk management. And we had to, because in the past we had, sometimes we have misunderstanding about the responsibility and accountability between the risk governance and risk management. So now, from the case of Vietcombank, we see that we have to clarify from the governance and the management. And the other thing, we had to see the universe of risks and especially focus on the macroeconomic uncertainties now, because we face many things that may draw the banks to the bankruptcy, right? Like a crisis, a financial crisis, or maybe the pandemic. And now we have the crisis on the real estate. And so we have to focus on the macroeconomics uncertainties. And we have to do with the framework, very clear framework for the risk management. And we have to make it separate risk management committee. You know that in the past, some Bank of Vietnam will combine the audit committee and risk committee. And now we have to separate it into two parts of the committee, is the risk committee and the audit committee. And we have to show the function of the committee very clearly. And it's because of the time limits, I have only have quick look and quick glance of the risk management in Vietnam for the banks. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor, for giving an overview of macroeconomic environment in Vietnam, also banking system in Vietnam, as well as risk management in Vietnam banks. Yeah. So, any questions or comments from the audience?
Okay, let me ask you a question to Professor Din Zhi. I know you are very much occupied with many administration. Thank you very much for attending and presenting this conference. Let me ask you a very general question. I guess was one simple number or very general risk management tool is a value at risk. Many financial institutions use the value at risk or VAR as a single most important mechanism to measure the risks. And after fixing the value at risk, the risk manager can go down to break out the whole risk into several pieces of the different kind of risk. Do your banks in Vietnam use the value at risk, or do they measure the value at risk from time to time?
Thank you for your question. Thank you, Professor. Actually, we use VARs always for the measure the risk. And actually, in our circulars, I don't remember exactly the number of the circulars. The State Bank of Vietnam required the banks had to report these indicators for the State Bank quarterly.
Quarterly, yes.
So I think, but beyond the requirement, I think the VAR is very important for the banks, because when they do the stress test and the early warnings, they had to calculate the VAR and the other indicators. But actually, we do not have some kind of the center of the data for the compared for all the banks. Actually, the State Bank had the big data for all the banks, but each bank do not have to compare. So that's why we pursue to have some kind of the information hub or something like this to have the banks to come to compute not only the VaR but also the other indicators for the risk management. Thank you for your question.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think that maybe because I take so long for the presentation, so we have a little time for the question. I am willing to have the other question, and you can message me and text message me, or maybe you can send me via email. I mean, willing to answer all the questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Professor. All right, so shall we move on to the next presentation? The next guest speaker is Phuphat and So-Young Lim. Phuphat is from National University of Laos, and So-Young Lim, Dr. So-Young Lim from Sungkyunkwan University. Their joint research is about asymmetric causality between insurance and growth in selected ASEAN countries. Since the presentation will be delivered in recorded video, I think Dr. So-Young's gonna just briefly introduce the research topic and other stuff for the first few minutes. So-Young, ready?
Thank you, Dr. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, and our paper is about the insurance growth and in some selected ASEAN countries. And actually, it has not published yet, but we are still working on. And we just focus on the importance of insurance in the modern economy. And we choose some ASEAN countries. I mean, because of the data limitation, we only choose the Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and Philippines, and also Malaysia. And we analyzed the insurance growth and the insurance using the asymmetric causality test. And I am the co-author of this paper. And actually, Professor Phuphat, he was scheduled to present this paper in person. However, he had some very urgent meeting, so he couldn't join in person. And so he sent me some recorded video about our paper. And Professor Phuphat, he got his PhD from Kobe University in Japan, and he's an active economist who were focused on some economic situation in ASEAN countries. And let me share Professor Phuphat's video file. It will run about 15 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is my great honor to give the presentation on asymmetric causality between insurance and growth in ASEAN country. This paper I co-authored with Dr. So-Young Lim. the first of all, as you know that the financial liberalization of financial sector is include insurance. This is very important for ASEAN country. In addition, liberalization on trade in services include ASEAN also the main key for the RCEP discussion. However, the financial sector, including insurance, is very insensitive issue. So that therefore, I think this is a very important study. In addition, we also see that several relationships between insurance could not reach the consensus. Some scholars found that they have causality between two variables, but some scholars support the supply lead hypothesis, while in opposite, some scholars support demand follow hypothesis. This means that the finding is still mixed. There are several different results from the study depend on the development characteristic, the methodology, and epoxy of viable use. So we can say that the insurance literature is widely how to say it is very complex and very from one country to another country. Therefore, I think this is very important to investigate more about the relationship between two variables. In addition, we can find that most study focus on developing countries. They have quite few literature on ASEAN countries. From the literature, we can find that the insurance might have the asymmetry impact in many markets, and therefore it is important to investigate the insurance market can have the asymmetry response to the change in economic growth. According to the why the asymmetry matter, as you see the literature review, we can see that the financial market seem to have the asymmetry. The bad news affect stock price more than the good news, right, in financial market. And some scholars also find out that the small amount of information can bring about asymmetry thing. So several empirical and study indicate that the dynamic insurance premium may be asymmetrical and nonlinear. So that they have number of the theory and the argument on the asymmetry, and so that's why we think that investigate the relationship between two variables in asymmetry way. I think this is very important. So as you already know that the role of insurance is very important to support the economic growth. First is to ensure financial stability and mobilizing and channeling for the saving and supporting trade and investment. And lastly, encourage accumulation of new capital and foster the more efficient allocation. And they have we think that this paper they have some contribution. First, I think this paper is investigate the asymmetric causality between insurance and growth in ASEAN, and we can second thing is we can explain asymmetry behavior in insurance and change in asymmetric causality test. And the last one is empirical study result could promote the economic development in ASEAN and the another country. So that let's look at the insurance development in ASEAN. The ASEAN have promising market, have the large population and youngest and dynamic region in the world. The financial, the insurance is very different by country. As you see, we can see that GDP per capita in insurance intensity were largest in the Singapore and followed by Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. If you can see in the table like this, right? Because, yeah, this one. And now let's look at the literature review. According to literature review, we have the review, the standard symmetry personality test. You can see they have number of study on this. Some study is support supply leading hypothesis. Some also support demand follow hypothesis. They use number of indicator to support the finding. Right? And surprisingly, we can see that they have some neutrality hypothesis, which means they have no causality between two variables. Right? From the summary of the literature review, we can find that they have most study use the standard Ganker causality test, and they focus on more developed country, and the finding is still mixed, and they have mixed finding, and they use number of insurance indicator like life, non-life, and total insurance. So we can see the few study on asymmetric personality test. The pioneer using asymmetric personality test is KARMI. He showed that they have the positive shock were different compared with negative shock in asymmetric way. Right? So let's see the methodology. We use the asymmetric Ganker causality that developed by KARMI. This approach is different from standard Ganker causality because they have the accumulative sum of positive and negative component to see how this accumulative sum and positive negative have the impact and causality each other. When we also employ bootstrapping to calculate more accurate the critical value for that. And the data, we use the data from Servicely Insurance Company, and the GDP is from World Bank indicator. We use 3 insurance indicator, life, non-life, and total insurance. And yeah, let's look at the data because of as you see in the characteristics measurement and or skewness measurement, we can see that they have the significant. It is mean they have some asymmetry in that variable. In addition, we can see have the BTS test for nonlinear. We also found that the data our data have is nonlinear. Right? And in addition, we also testing the parameter stability test from NU also we found out that our parameter is instability. Yeah. So that's why from that three tests, we can justify that the asymmetric causalité is more appropriate than another method. Now let's look at firstly we do some demand follow hypothesis about whether growth is caused the insurance in life insurance, and we divide it to non-life insurance and total insurance. And demand follow supply leading hypothesis also we do by different type of insurance like life insurance, non-life insurance, and total insurance. To save the time, here is the summary of the demand follow hypothesis. We can see that the standard methodology on country, we did not support demand follow hypothesis, which means the goal will lead insurance, lead to increased insurance, right? But we cannot see any country. If we did the asymmetric causality, we can find some causality between them. This means that positive sum of growth have caused negative, will cause the negative impact on insurance. It seems that the negative shock will also cause the negative declining in insurance too. So that we can find that from this table, right? There is the summary from demand follow that I mentioned before. Now look at the supply leading hypothesis. Most of the country we can see not so much in standard anchor causality support the supply leading, but only few. But if you look at more clearly, we can see that they have quite few that positive shock in insurance will lead to positive growth, right? Quite number. They have only for Indonesia and Malaysia and Philippines, right? But we in addition we also found that negative shock in insurance will lead to negative in economic growth in most some country like Thailand and Philippines, Malaysia, and also Indonesia, but different type of insurance. But surprisingly, we cannot find that supply leading hypothesis in Singapore. Maybe in Singapore they have too much. They have support and the hypothesis whether they have too much finance already. That thing is interesting finding that only Singapore that cannot support the supply leading hypothesis in Singapore. Now I come to the conclusion that we can come to conclusion like this, that in the standard asymmetry causality we did not found the demand follow hypothesis, but from asymmetry causality we found some causality in the demand follow hypothesis, right? And it seems that the result from asymmetric causality that is indicate the country specific relationship between insurance and goal, and they have the different country specific, and it seems that negative shock in insurance and growth were stronger than positive shock in to the most country. that is the finding of this analysis. Thank you. Now the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prophet and So Young, for introducing very interesting topic. Typically, insurance is perceived as an important tool to improve economic development in various ways. It was very interesting to note that insurance can affect economic development or growth in different directions in different nations. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. And any questions from the audience? Okay, so we're once again we are sorry for that Professor Buffet cannot join in person today. And anyway, in the past, the previous researches mostly focus on some the insurance growth and the economic growth using the standard symmetric causality method. However, we choose the other method for the analogization, and we need to develop some more about our leisure parts, and and so thank you for taking your time to listen our presentation. All right, any questions from the audience? Any other questions? We still have a couple of minutes to the next presenter. All right, okay. Shall we just carry on then? Yeah, sure. Okay, so next presenter, Professor Song-Lim Lee. She's gonna discuss the dual earner household and food expenditure. So she's gonna share the slides. Yeah, okay. Professor Song-Lim Lee, please, could you please turn on? Yeah.
Okay, yes. Should I start?
Yep.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, this is Song-Lim Lee in the Department of Consumer Science in Seongkyungwan University. The theme of this presentation is the dual on household and food expenditure, as the presider already talked. Yeah, background of the study. Time constraints faced by working mothers are associated with an increase in unhealthy eating. Full-time employed mothers are more likely to consume food away from home, such as fast food and takeout food, and they are more often reported missing out on family meals and more often consumed fewer fruits and vegetables per day. Few studies examine the role of the employed mothers' earnings on food spending because it is assumed that working mothers' earnings will benefit family health with increased family income, which makes healthier and nutritious foods more affordable. Exploring the effect of employed mothers' earnings on food expenditure is important because purchased food has become common in the family diet with remarkable development in the food industry. And therefore, the household budget for food play an essential role in a healthy dietary lifestyle. However, employment segregation constrains women to work in unpaid, informal, and low-return jobs, thus becoming one of the primary contributors of gender wage gaps worldwide. So the purpose of this study is to explore the effect of employed mothers' earnings on food expenditure. To demonstrate the impact of an employed woman's low earnings, this study employed the intra-household gender earnings gap as an independent variable and used Korean data. Korea is the country with the largest gender wage gap. The previous studies had shown that the lack of time to prepare meals in dual-earner households has not been linked to a significant increase in food expenditure, neither in the US nor in Australia. The employed mothers reduced their time and energy for meal preparation without spending enough on market substitute for meals. The gender theory of household resource allocation proposed that men and women differed in their spending preferences and used their income differently. Women spend more of the resources and income under their control on providing for family. Women's earnings and the control of economic resources affect their ability to direct spending on goods that represent their preference. The separate sphere model proposed by Lundberg and Pollack. This theory states that husbands and wives bear the responsibility for a gender-specific set of household activities. For example, the women are responsible for preparing meals, and men are responsible for repairing cars, etc. And husbands and wives make decisions and optimize consumption within their sphere, subject to individual income constraints, not family income. So the expenditure on food and restaurant food, they are traditionally classified as the women's rhythm, not significantly associated with household income, but with women's earnings. And spouse income transfer to women increased food expenditure when women earned little. Implications from the separate sphere model for food expenditure is that women's earnings, not household income, are used for buying food in dual-earner households. So higher income in the hands of women increased spending on food. So in a society with a large gender wage gap where women earn less than men, nutritionally inadequate diet may be possible even in the middle and upper income households, depending on the employed mother's income. So based on this background, I proposed 2 research questions. The first one is, do dual earner households spend less on food than male breadwinner households in a society with a large gender wage gap? The second, how does the intra-household gender earning gap affect food expenditure and food expenditure differential with and without the employed mother in dual earner household? I used Korean data because Korea has the largest gender wage gap. The Korean women earned 31.1% less than men in 2021. The OECD average is 11.7%. And male breadwinner households are prevailing in Korea. Only 45.4% of couples in 2020 had dual earners in Korea. How in Korea, husbands with employed wives did not spend more time on housework. The husband in dual earner households spent 35 hours per week, and husband who was sole breadwinner spent 7.23 to 3 hours per week. So there was a little difference between these 2 groups. So Korea has very male dominating the environment. So the Korean data provide a very good example to examine the effect of gender wage gap on food expenditure. I used Korean labor and the income panel study from 16th to 23rd waves. So 8 years of panel data was used. The sample excluded households with a husband who was not working or an unpaid worker or a wife working as an unpaid worker. So the husband with no earnings or wife who work but does not have any earning, they are excluded in the sample. And include couple households with husband and wives less than 55 years of age. This is the prime working age in Korea. And households participating in the survey at least 2 times because to estimate the fixed effect, the within group effect. The final sample consists of an unbalanced panel of 3,586 households, and we have a total of 17,847 observations in the sample. The number of observations per household was 4.9 times. The dependent variable was the log of monthly food expenditure measured in Korean won. And the second dependent variable was the difference in food expenditures with and without employed mothers in the dual earner households. The food expenditure without maternal earnings was not observed in most dual earner households, so I used the predicted food expenditures assuming without the employed mother in the household. The measure independent variables are 2. The one is the dual earner household dump variable. The second one is the intra-household gender earnings gap. The intra-household gender earnings gap was measured by the difference between the mother's and the father's earnings divided by the father's earnings, following the OECD definition of the gender wage gap. And I have several control variables, social demographic factors related to the budget constraints and the demand for food, such as family income, the father's earnings, income transfer from parents, house type, housing tenure, family size, household composition, father's age, father's work status, mother's education, and reason. And the model to estimate the effect of independent variables on dependent variable was the hybrid model with a random slope. Sometimes it is called the mixed model. The hybrid model decomposed the independent variables into two parts. The one is household mean. The other one is deviation from the household mean. So household mean represents the between household effect, and deviation from household mean represent the within group effect. Therefore, the hybrid model provide both within and between group effects. So, and random slopes are allowed only to the substantive predictor variable of interest. So the dual on a dummy variable and the intra-household gender earnings gap. The major findings are as follows. The first model is the estimates of the hybrid model for food expenditure with the total household. So the dependent variable was the food expenditure of the dual on households and sole bread in a household. The effect of dual on households, the first line, the first line shows the effect of dual on a household on food expenditure. The within effect is not significant. The between effects are negatively significant. So within group effect of the employed model dummy variable was not significant. And the family income, both within and between effects are all significant. So the results indicated that the results of the within group effect indicated that the changes in mother's employment status did not make a significant difference in food expenditure within a household. And between group effects indicated that households with employed mothers spent less on food than those with the non-employed mothers. So the employed mothers are likely to purchase relatively cheap food, which may lead to a lower quality and a less healthy diet for the family. So our the conventional knowledge is that the dual on households may spend more money on food expenditure, but the between group effects, the result of the between group effects is totally opposite. They spent less on food, and within group effect, the within group effect means changes in mother's employment status in a household. It does not make any difference in food expenditure within a household. So these results are contradict with our conventional knowledge. The next result is about the analysis of only dual on households. The independent variable was the intra-household gender earnings gap. In this, as you see in the table, the within group effect was not significant. Only between group effects was significant, and it was negatively related. the changes in intra-household gender and earning gap, so the within group effect in a dual-owner household did not make a significant difference in food expenditure. The between group effects indicated that the dual-owner households with the larger intra-household gender earning gap spent significantly less on food expenditure. This is another surprising. It is not surprising. It is consistent with separate sphere, the predictions from the separate sphere model. The next analysis is about the food expenditure differential with and without employed mothers in dual-owner households. In this analysis, within group effects and between group effect shows a consistent results. Gender earnings gap has a negative effect, and log of husband earnings shows negative effect. So both within and between group effects of the intra-household gender earning gap and log husband earnings were negatively significant on food expenditure differentials. The result indicated that the changes in the intra-household gender earning gap over time in a dual-owner households shows a negative effect, which means the increased intra-household gender earning gap was significantly related to decreased food expenditure differentials in a dual-owner household. The between group effects indicated that the dual-owner households with the larger intra-household earning gap significantly lesser increased or greater decreased food expenditure compared with that without employed mothers. The lower mother earned than the father in the household, the less she increased spending on food, which complemented the reduced homemade meals. The changes in the father's earnings over time in a dual-owner household had a negative within group effect. And the dual-owner household with a higher father's earnings significantly less increased or greater decreased food expenditure when the mother earned income. These results indicated that the father's earnings were not used for buying food when mothers earned an income. So to summarize the results, this analysis shows that the maternal employment added income to the households. However, in some dual-owner households, depending on the intra-household gender earning gap and the father's earnings, such an increase in household income did not necessarily lead to a rise in food expenditure and even reduced food spending through the gendered financial management practices in the household. By this study generated two major findings. The first one is dual-owner households spend significantly less on food than sole male breadwinner households. And a larger inter-household gender earning gap and the father's higher earnings were related to a lowered increase in spending on food. As a reason, households with employed mothers did not significantly increase food expenditure. This study highlights the role of the intra-household gender earning gap. The employed mothers' lower earnings compared to those of fathers. Women's earning, not household income, are used to purchase food. The gendered division of responsibility for housework in households influences how households use earnings from men and women differently. Women are more likely than men to have a temporary employment contract rather than to have a permanent contract due to employment segregation and labor market dualism. Employment segregation constrains women labor force participants into low-paying temporary jobs, and labor market dualism, which is the labor market division into permanent and temporary employment, is a major source of gender inequality in the workforce. And in this environment, the poor status of women in the labor market has an impact on women's earnings. This in turn affects the budget for food in the household and consequently the quality of the family diet. Yeah, this is the implications. We draw implications of these results that introducing how a broad social environmental context at the macro level, such as gender wage gap in the labor market and the culturally defined gender roles, could affect family consumption and consequently diet quality. So the low gender inequality has the negative effect on food expenditure in the household and nutrition nutrition for the family members. So family welfare is reduced by the gender inequality in the labor market. The higher income family with an employed mother in a low-paying job may have reduced food expenditure according to the women's earnings. So less food expenditure and a low quality diet may be possible even in your-own households with higher socio-economic backgrounds. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Professor Lee. Okay.
Thank you.
Although you are not ASEAN member, you don't belong to the ASEAN member country, but at least you are Asian.
Okay, thank you for Professor Songlin Lee for your presentation on the relationship, the earnings and food expenditure. So actually, it is quite fascinating. I mean, surprising to note that Korea is actually officially declared as a developed country by UNCTAD last year, but it's quite frustrating to note that, like, the gender gap is huge between the men and women, and also was very interesting to know that there's no significant relationship in terms of the maternal earning. The relationship, I mean, the maternal earning and the food expenditure. there's not much there's no like a significant relationship between the maternal earning and though it increases the more income to the family, but it doesn't necessarily increase the spending on expenditure. Yeah, I enjoyed the your presentation so much, and I'd like to just gather some questions or comments from the audience. Yeah, any questions?
Well, let me give my comment rather than question on your presentation. In my family case, my wife's earning, I have my wife's also making earning, and in my family case, my income goes to be spent on food and clothing and so on, while my wife's income goes to saving. So my income disappears, her income stays at home. And of course, as like other families, the female, my wife, controls the whole budget. She's the Minister of Finance. So she decides how to spend the money and how to save money. So if the female member controls the budget plan, then I think she wants to spend or use the money, use her money or her income to her advantage or to her preference, rather than spending and disappearing. So in that case, what you said is the female income used to be spent as a consumption on food, but it may be different, opposite from the fact.
I think in your case, the gender intra-household gender earnings gap is not so much. So
maybe
probably,
not. Right.
yeah. So in that case, the food expenditure didn't decrease. The result, my results indicate imply that in your case, the gender earnings gap is small. The food expenditure did not decrease or increase less because your wife earning is high. So according to high earnings, the food expenditure might increases. So your case is not the case. It's not the the result of this study says that the gender wage gap, the lower earnings, the household with lower maternal earnings has the problem in food consumption. Not so the higher earnings of the women earn more and more, the food expenditure increases. So in that case, there's no problem. And so actually the lower earnings, the women earn less. They do not have enough money to purchase food because in most cases the food expenditure is financed by women's earnings, not men's earning. In most cases, I think that the data said in developed countries or even in developing countries, women's the resources on the women's control is used for food purchase. So I think your case is not
I see. General case in your research. I see. Then why do you think it's a question? Why do you think the woman's income in your research goes to food spending? Why not male's income?
Yeah, but the separate sphere model and other gender theory says that there is there is some gender roles in the household. Usually, women prepare meals for the family members. That's the not Oriental countries, but also in Western countries, women prepare meals for the family. Women provide food for the family. So it is connected to the spending practices in the household. It is the implications of the separate spare model by the Pollack and Lundberg.
And clothing also goes to female member. Clothing spending.
The clothing spending for child is financed by mother's earnings.
Mother, I see.
Yeah, not father's earnings.
Then education or the house purchase goes to role of the male.
Education, I do not see any result about the education. I just see the childcare cost. For example, the kindergarten or the caring cost for the young baby. This cost is financed by mother's earnings, not father's earnings. But I do not see any result, any research about the educational expenditure.
Maybe other participants have questions to the presentation of Professor Lee. So in your research, the worst family in terms of the food spending is the double income family with the mother earning very low. Is that right?
I think mother's earnings is low, but father's earning can be lower than that. In that case, the mother's employment is benefit for food in the family.
I see.
Yeah. The worst case is that high father's earning and low mother's earning. That's the
that's what I
potentially negative effect on food spending.
So it's not fortunate to have a father with a large income when mother makes very little money.
But I think so in most cases, when man earns a higher income, the woman did not enter to the labor market. That's the very common case in Korea.
Right.
So the higher educated woman married to a higher earning man. Many Korean women didn't work in the labor market. So probably this phenomenon is related to that. I'm not sure about that. I didn't test on this question, but yeah. Yeah, I didn't use English for a long time, so it's very. So speaking English is not so comfortable for me right now, but thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Yeah, I feel the Professor Lee's research is quite complicated. There are so many different cases to analyze. And the outcome, research outcome is quite counterintuitive.
Yeah.
That's another issue to resolve.
Yeah, so that is why I used the panel data and applying new research method like hybrid model with random slope.
Thanks for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Professor Jong Lee, for your presentation. Yeah. Now we have 2 minutes. Shall we just start? Yeah. The next speaker is Tran Thi Tan Tu, professor and vice president from Vietnam National University. The topic is about the development of Green Bank in Vietnam.
Yes. Good morning. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning, Professor Jung. Good morning, Lim. Nice to see you all. Yeah. Can I share the slide?
Sure.
Okay. Can you see my sharing?
Yes, very well.
Okay. So first, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Professor Jung and also Professor SKKU for inviting me to join in the workshop today. I would like to share with you our result relating to our national project focused on developing the green finance in Vietnam. This my presentation, including 5 main contents. First is the rationale of the research, and second, I would like to have an overview on green finance and banking, and then I will focus on the green bank in Vietnam, the current situation in green bank in Vietnam. And then in the next section, I would like to share with you our finding on the determinants of green bank development in Vietnam. And last, I would like to suggest some policy recommendation for the policymaker and also the bank manager in Vietnam. You know that in Vietnam now, the Ministry of Finance and Investment try to achieve the objective proposed by Green Development Project, and up to $30 billion need of investment capital. And this is the big challenge as the national budgets and the support of international funds are limited. And you know that in Vietnam, we have the bank-based economy, and the Vietnamese firm depends on the bank credit for green investment or green production and green project. And that's why we try in our research, we focus on change the structure of economy towards a greener economy through the banking system. And that's why we see the role, the important role of the banking system in Vietnam. So we would like to evaluate the bank's development in Vietnam under the international standards. So an overview of green finance and green bank in Vietnam. As you know that the green growth is the process of promoting economic growth and development while maintaining and developing natural capital, mitigating pollution and environment degradation, curbing greenhouse gas emission, and providing more jobs for society. And what is the role of the green finance in the green economy? From our research, the green finance system are the same with the finance system. Only the difference is that the targets, the aim of the old investment on the credit channel focus on the green investment, focus on the green production. So we also have the green investment is the key pillar of the green finance system. And through the green investment, the bank can issue the green credit or even to a green bond, and the green capital will be used to invest in the green production. So there are 2 kinds of raising the green capital. Through the intermediary, we have the role of the bank and the investment fund, and directly the company can issue the green bond and green stock. So the most important, the key points is that in the green finance system, all the project, all the investment are green. But what are the green investment? Yeah, in what are the criteria to determine this production, this project is green or not? So, which is the different coins of the different size of the coins? In this research, we focus on the green bank, and we try to analyze the determinant to impact to the green bank, and especially how is this determinants affect to the green bank in Vietnam. So from the broad concept of green bank, under the mission and theme research in 2010, the green bank is a sustainable bank. The sustainable bank, that means all the investment of this bank focus on the sustainable project. However, it's too broad. So we approach the narrow concept. The green bank refers to its operational activities and that encourage environmental activities to reduce carbon emission. And under this definition, we try to narrow down. The bank is considered green bank. It meets both conditions. First, this bank have to provide green services in the short term, maybe in terms of green credit and finance for the green investment. And the second condition is that the bank have to provide the business strategy satisfying environmental criteria and social responsibility in the long term. So, what are the green bank in Vietnam? We try to follow the international standard, international best practice to apply, to evaluate what is the green bank in Vietnam. From the State Bank of Vietnam survey, that only 19 banks, over 35 banks in the whole Vietnamese bank system, we have 39 banks. So only 19, nearly 50% banks have the developed strategies for environmental and social risk management. However, only 13 banks have integrated the content of environmental and social risk management in the process of the green credit assessment, and in which there are only 10 banks to build the credit products and bank services focus on the green sector and showed interest in providing credit, mainly in medium and long term with the preferential interest rate for the green project. And these 10 banks receive strongly support from the international organization, international financial organizations such as IFC or ADB or the World Bank to approach the long-term capital to finance for the green investment. And we try to apply the green bank model, the 5 levels of green bank model under Kofler research in 2010 to determine what are the level, what are the assessment of the green bank in Vietnam. And under Kofler, there are 5 levels of green bank. The lowest level is the funding for the green events and participating in the community activities such as finance for the growing trees or finance for an environmental event. And in the second level, the bank have to develop the more separate green banking products and services, such as the bank to set up a line from the head office to the branches to provide the green credit or green services to green project. And in the third level, the bank have upgrade not only a line, but also a systematic business activity through the headquarters to the branches to the sub-branches to provide the green banking products. And at the level 4, the bank has initiative of strategic ecosystem to support for the CSR of the bank. And in the highest level, the bank initiative of approaching ecosystem to involve in the ecosystem of the whole economy. This is the 5 level of the green bank under the international standard. What are the overview of green bank in Vietnam? Frankly speaking, the head of the State Bank of Vietnam tried to launch the green bank since 2015. However, under the up to now, we do not have any policy strictly require the bank to follow the green bank development. It only stop at the encourage the bank try to follow the green bank system. So that's why the SBV, State Bank of Vietnam, only plan to have at least 10 banks established unit or department of environmental. That means the bank to follow the green development strategy or not. It will depend on the strategy of the bank, not push up from the State Bank of Vietnam. Here is some statistic about the green credit balance by sector. That is supply the credit through the banking system in Vietnam. And here you see that more than 50% green credit finance for the green agriculture, such as the high-tech in agriculture, and this is the most interested area by the investor in Vietnam. And then we have about 13% focus on the water management in urban and rural area, or about nearly 4%. This data is in 2019, but up to now we have about 5% of green credit finance to renewable energy. Frankly speaking, renewable energy is one of our top priority financed by the bank and also by investor in Vietnam now. And to evaluate the determinants of green bank development in Vietnam, we try to apply the level of green bank in Vietnam by Kepler and in the 5 levels, and we determine the factors affect the development of green bank in Vietnam. We divide it into 6 factor groups, including government support policy, macro factors, firm demand on green investment, bank financial performance, bank manager knowledge, and the last one is the employee performance. And we deliver our survey to the bank manager and bank leaders in Vietnam. And then we apply the EFA, exploratory factor analysis, to determine the factors of green bank development in Vietnam. And in our model, we try to follow the previous research, and then we make some revision in the variables, especially for the government support policy from the previous research and UNEP. We found that the government support policy is very key, important determinants impact to the green bank in the Asian country, and we try to test whether the government support policy will impact on the green bank development of Vietnam or not. And the other macro factors, including the GDP or the long-term nominal interest rate, we also follow the approach and we try to apply in our research. And one of the most important determinants is the internal factors through the bank, that is the financial performance of the bank. Because from our in-depth interview, we found that many bank managers saying that because of the lack of capital equity, they cannot provide credit to the green project, because the green project will take longer period of cover the capital investment. So they will have to put the money in this project with the longer time than the other project. And we also test whether the bank manager knowledge will impact to the green credit or green development bank, because from the approach of the top leaders, the thinking or the awareness of the top leader is very important when they make decision to develop the strategy forward to the green development or not. And the last one is the performance of the bank employees, because through the in-depth interview, we also found that the performance, the professional of the bank staff when evaluate the green project, especially in the renewable energy project, they lack of knowledge. So they cannot make evaluation of this project. So that's why we try to include this factor to test in our research. And we conduct the survey in the period of 2019 and from the 30 banks in Vietnam. And we have the result showing with you. In terms of development of level of green bank in Vietnam, in the Likert, we have the mostly answer saying that the green bank in Vietnam is at the level 3. That means most of the interviewee agreeing that the bank in Vietnam at the level 3. That means they separate the green credit strategy, but not only the whole system, but only a separate line to provide the green credit. And based on the survey, we also test the 6 factors impact on the green bank development in Vietnam. And here is the statistical result. And we also check with person correlation to check, And we found that there are 3 factors that impact on the green bank development in Vietnam. The first factor is the employees' performance, and it is also consistent with the previous research. This is the most important factors impact to the development of green bank in Vietnam, and they include some more implying that employees have been professionally training about green bank, because the green project is very specific. They will need more knowledge and skill. It will be different with the normal investment. And employees have the ability to use green technique, and employees handle operation promptly and accurately. And finally, employees pay attention to save energy, natural resources, and protect the environment. These are very simple one, but once the employees raise their awareness about the green banking, they will try to save the energy and natural resources. The second factors affect the green bank development in Vietnam include the awareness of the bank manager. These factors group include 8 factors, and this very important. The second important impact to the green development because it's the bank leaders, it's the bank manager. We decided to follow the strategy of the bank in green credit or not. And finally, we have the next factor, including firm demand on the green investment, and also the government policy also have the impact, but the less importance than the previous factors. However, we cannot find the relationship between the bank's financial performance and macro factors impact to the development of level of green bank in Vietnam. It's somehow different with the other previous research, and it implying that we should focus on the first 4 factors, including the awareness of the bank manager, professional of the staff, and the demand for the green investment. So, finally, in terms of development level of green bank, the empirical results showing that the Vietnamese bank are currently at the level 3. systematic business practice, but only in a separate business practice, not in the proactive strategy development on the green. And the result is consistent with happening in Vietnam banking system from the report of State Bank of Vietnam. However, in terms of determinants affecting green bank development, our empirical results showing that the largest impact factor is employees' performance, and the second impact factor is the awareness of the green bank from the bank manager and top leaders of the bank. And the third impact factors is the firm's demand on the green investment. And the smallest impact factor is government policy. It is a surprise that the smallest impact factor is government policy. So that's the same story when we research and discuss with the South Africa bank. They also share with us that the government policy in South Africa not impact on the green development in Africa. In South Africa, it's the role of the firms. It's also interesting. And from this research result, we also propose some recommendations. First, the government, the State Bank of Vietnam, Ministry of Finance, try to develop the strategy, action plans, and policy to promote green bank development and green investment. However, it is not the top impact factor. However, we try to combine between the top-down approach and bottom-up approach to push up the green investment in Vietnam. And from the bottom up, we also suggest that the bank can actively build development strategy for green bank. In Vietnam, we found that the small bank, the joint stock bank, seems more active than the largest bank in the green credit, in the green development. Because when the small bank active in the green credit, they can receive support from the international organization to approach to use the long-term fund with a very favorable interest. And the bank actively develop green portfolio to diversify risk and anticipate green investment. And last, the bank should improve staff qualification in approving, appraising, and selecting green investment projects, because it is the largest impact factor on the green development in Vietnam. And we also have some recommendation on the communication, because the communication is very important. And this should focus on the information about green credit to business sector, because through the business sector, they have to change the way of the green production. And then from the consumer, we try to change our consumer behavior to the sustainable development. And in terms of university institute, like Vietnam National University, we also have improved research and training on the green growth and sustainable science. Currently, we are developing the new curriculum, the new training program from the undergrad to the postgraduate, focused on the green growth and green finance. So that's why we propose that there should have a package that combine not only the top-down approach, but also the bottom-up approach, and with the involvement more of the research and the university institution to develop the green bank in particular, and also the green finance in general. Yes, that's all for my presentation, and I'm very happy to receive your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Professor Tranti Tanfu.
Okay, do you have any comments and questions? I'm very happy to hear from you. Thank you.
If nobody asks a question, let me ask you one question. I know you are very busy with managing your university in terms of the finance. I guess you are kind of CFO of your university, and to develop the new site, a new campus, and funding, lots of money, and so on. And is there any particular plan for your university to grow in terms of the environmental elaboration?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Jung, for your very interesting question. I would like to share with you some strategy focused on the sustainable development from Vietnam National University Hanoi approach. As we target at the top 300 university ranking in the world in the next 5 years. So to impact the impact on the sustainable development is very important in our strategy. We have three approach. The first is we develop the training program, the education program from the bachelor program to the PhD program, focus on the sustainable development. Yeah, such as we have the master on the environmental management, we have the doctor degree on the sustainable finance, and we have many bachelor program focused on the environmental management and the interdisciplinary science, both in finance and environmental, physics and environmental. The second approach is we try to build up some research, especially joint research group, focus on the sustainable development. And it's our strength when under VNU Hanoi, we have the 10 belonging university. We have the Natural Science University, we have the Science University, we have Education, we have Technology University. That is the interdisciplinary university, so that we build up the joint research group under VNU's focus on the sustainable development. And the third approach that we try to create the linkage between the university and the business sector, yeah, in providing the consultant service, such as we provide the consultant service for the corporation in Vietnam to build up the in the lowest level that to produce the green product, and in the higher level to build up the sustainable strategy development in the three approaches.
So you are aiming to be one of the top 300 universities in the world next to 5 years, you say?
Sorry, I cannot hear you.
So your university vision is to become a top 300 university in the world in next to five years. Is that right?
I'm sorry, my internet is interruption. I cannot hear you.
I just asked a little question about your university vision to become one of the top 300 universities in the world. Is that right?
Sorry, can you repeat? Sorry.
Dr. Kim, please.
So I think today is many professor in a different area. So I'd like to put my email here so that we can keep contact and contact later to create the joint research group or to make collaboration. Under Vietnam National University, we have, as I said before, we have 10 universities, and even SKKU also signed MOU with VNU before. And once again, I'd like to thank Professor Jung to join with us in our previous semester at the University of Economics and Business. Yeah, and I do hope we can have more activity, more collaboration, yeah, in the near future.
Yeah, it's our pleasure and honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I will leave my email here for further contact. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Right, I think this is all for today. Thank you very much for your participation, and yeah, what should I say? So tomorrow, our conference continues. We are going to cover risk management Asia, as well as ESG and digitalization, which are which have received a lot of attention around the world. Once again, thank you for your participation, and we're really looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. So stay tuned, please. Thank you.
Thank you.